Louisiana. You are listening to the Angel Rock. I'm your Lorilei Potvin. Little bit about the show. If you've never been here before, welcome. And if you're an audience member, thank you. We always appreciate your support. Remember, there's always something for everybody on UPRN, so please don't hesitate to share, subscribe, and like our posts. We have so many new hosts coming on the network with great guests and great shows. I have a great guest for you. If you've never been to the show before, I cover all aspects, I say, of the esoteric, paranormal, spirituality, power of the mind, power of positivity, and things like that. So, and my guest tonight is quite fascinating. It's a very timely subject. Some of the things that are coming up in his new book that we're going to talk about. I'm going to read his bio. Before I get started, though, one thing I do want to remind too, actually, I forgot to mention we are on Roku. UPRN, the network is. There's certain channels that are streaming under our channel. I don't have a channel code for you. So the easiest way to find it is to go to the channel store on Roku. You're going to look up UFO space P as in paranormal. There's about 3 or 4 that'll come up, and you're looking for UFO space paranormal and United Public. And that's where you'll find some of our shows. Also, if you want to join in the comments and you want to be part of the discussion, if you've been here before, you know that I always involve you there with us. Come on over either to UFO Paranormal Radio, either the Facebook page or the YouTube channel, and we'll be able to see your comments. Lastly, I forgot to mention this. How could I forget this? Be sure to tune in Thursday night. We are going to be at our new time from 7 to 9 p.m. with my second show on the network with my amazing co-host, David Hansel, and it's called The Thing at the Foot of the Bed. Now, on to my amazing guest. He's been so patient because I've had us never fails. Sometimes we get connection problems. So if we do, guys, I got a backup plan. So anyways, my guest this evening is Donald Altman, who is a psychotherapist, a former monk, a 2-time Emmy Award winner, and award-winning author of over 20 books and CDs on mindfulness and spirituality. He's got a new book out called Travelers, and we're going to talk about the book and many, many other topics on mental health issues, wherever the conversation goes. So welcome, Donald. I'm so glad to have you here.
Oh, well, hi, Lorilei. Great to be here with you, and I'm excited to share some ideas with your audience and really maybe look at some things we haven't looked at in a while.
I think it's a great idea. Actually, I knew you were coming on tonight, like today. I was thinking about you since yesterday. I always confirm with my guests, usually the day of the show, because life happens. But boy, people are having a hard time, especially over the last few years. So we're going to be careful what we say, what words, but it's pretty hard, pretty easy for people to figure it out. But you know what? I always like to start at the beginning. And this is pretty fascinating because I forgot to mention to people in my panic about what I'm doing here, connecting. I'm a clairvoyant medium. I'm also a crystal Reiki healer, Akashic Records practitioner, spiritual teacher and mentor, and I'm also a registered nurse. So kind of mixing spirituality with nursing, but your background, you used to be a monk and then now you're a psychotherapist. So how does that happen? Tell us about it. How did you get started as a monk? What possessed you to look into that? I think that's cool.
Well, the monk situation happened for me when I was really struggling. And I think, we'll make changes when the pain of what we're experiencing is greater than the fear of change. And so that's what happened to me. I realized I needed to change certain things in my life. Harmful patterns were repeating. And I had a trauma history as a child. I mean, so many people experience trauma, right? And we're always struggling with it. And if you're in a human body, if you have a human mind, who is not going to experience loss of some kind and experience grief, right? This is really, it's a common birthright that we all have in common. And so anyway, I went through one of these difficult times in my life. And right around that time, somebody had said to me, I think there's a monk I'd like you to meet. And so maybe this is a cautionary tale about meeting a monk because you might end up in a monastery like I did. But I met this monk. You never know. And I met this monk at a very difficult time in my life. And I
Mhm.
was struck just by how, this sometimes you ever been around anybody where you feel something, an energy coming from them, and I felt this
All the time.
palpable sense. Yeah. And so I felt it from him. I felt this sense of compassion, the sense of availability, the sense of just wanting to help in a way that I had never felt so strongly from someone before. And even though it was just a brief meeting with him, things changed shortly after that, where I had lost the job that I had, and many of my dreams I felt shattered in a lot of ways. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And even though I had been to psychotherapy when I was in my 20s, I had a major depressive disorder at that time. And uh, I felt I wanted to somehow go more deeply and see why was this pattern repeating in my life. And so I
Mhm.
decided to ordain with this monk as the head of the monastery, called a sayadaw. That means the abbot, the head of the monastery. And he was a well-known teaching monk from Burma. So this was outside of Los Angeles in near the San Bernardino Mountains. And they were all Burmese monks, and they were
Mhm.
supported by a Burmese community. So for me, it was a very foreign kind of a thing. Fortunately, they spoke English most of
Oh,
the
yeah.
time. And when I went in, I was really, not sure what was going to happen. I mean, what's this ordination or initiation going to be like? And the first thing they did, I remember this monk comes up and you're sitting down in front of all the monks, and there were about six. It was a small monastery, but one of the monks comes up with this long straight razor, and I had a lot of curly hair back then, and he starts shaving my head, and and then one of the monks, and it was him, I think, he held up a lock of my hair. And I got my first teaching when the monk said to me, the Uthilananda, the head monk said, this is not you. This is not who you are. And it kind of shocked me for a moment. What do you mean? That's my hair. But it was the first lesson about non-attachment, about letting go of the things we're attached to. We're attached with our ego to things. The things that we're attached to are often the things that can be beautiful things. We're attached to the ones we love, and we're attached to our children and things like that. But they can also cause us suffering if you become too attached to something, or when things
Yes.
change in our life. If you're not willing to let go, that can be a lot of suffering, a lot of pain. So that is one of the core teachings in that tradition, is the old tradition of Buddhism. And so I went through the training, and it really shifted my life. I can't tell you, when I left the monastery, and there was a beautiful ceremony for leaving, I went in realizing I'd just be there for a period of time, because I always felt my work would be out here in the world. And but when I left the
Mhm.
monastery, um, I was really had a huge mind shift and a heart shift, I think, in a very powerful way. And if somebody who had known me before and after
Mhm.
could probably feel that in me. And so it was interesting.
Mhm.
I even tried to maintain silence after I left the monastery. We were not silent completely in the monastery. They had little signs up that said "noble silence," which meant be silent unless you really need to speak, right? And so I tried to maintain
Mhm.
that. And I carried a little notepad with me, and I wrote down things. And I realized that eventually I had to just embrace coming back into this world. And I did retreats on spiritual eating, mindful eating, because when I went to the monastery, I was a very mindless eater. And that was one of the things I was
Mhm.
hoping to get to the bottom, was to understand, why am I such an emotional eater? And I was trying to cover up a lot of my pain through eating. And anybody out
Mhm.
there in our audience knows that doesn't solve the problem, right? That doesn't take away the pain, because it's not a physical hunger that you're trying to make go away. It's something emotional, and food may only remove that pain for a brief moment, right? So it was a very powerful experience for me to go into the monastery. And when I got out, I started doing workshops about spiritual eating and using food as a spiritual path. And it was wonderful meeting all these people. But people would come up to me, Lorilei, and they'd kind of whisper in my ear after the workshop, and they say, I have this anorexia problem, or I have this bulimia problem. And I
I've
was like,
had it.
whoa,
I've had it
yeah,
as a teenager from about 17 to 19.
Yeah.
Get it.
And I believe me, I had no clue about how to work with those people. I mean, they came up to me and I wanted to help them. And so I realized, I have to, not only can I work spiritually with them, but I want to know how to work clinically, right, with something like that. So I went back to school, something that I never thought would happen. I was like 50 years old, went back to school, became a psychotherapist, and it could turn my life in a completely different direction, but I think a beautiful direction actually. But I couldn't have predicted it. And then I worked in an eating disorder clinic. I mean, it was really an amazing journey that I got to work in psychiatric clinics, and and it got involved in the mental health field as I did. But I never forgot what I learned from the monks. I never forgot those lessons, and I even worked with the monks after I got out of the monastery. And it's continued to be a part of my life. I think once you've done something like that, if you've done anything that's been really profound to you, that moved you in a way, you carry that with you. And I think we need to remember how to tap into those things that were meaningful and purposeful to us in our lives. And so I started working in the mental health field, but I brought in the mindfulness, which I was so grateful for. When I was in school, actually, I really was worried, well, how are they going to take this whole mindfulness piece? You're learning these different therapy modalities like, cognitive behavioral therapy and all these different ways of working with people. But what I found was it was actually pretty much embraced. And I was able to bring it in my own way and work it in if people were open to it, of course, right? And what I found too was that it really helped a lot of people. So it was a very beautiful way of working with people, letting them explore their own the weeds inside themselves and pull their own weeds out, right? Because sometimes you go into a therapy room, and I have people say to me, Donald, I need your, what should I do? They'd ask me point blank, what should I do about this problem? And I'd say, well, look, if I give you an answer and it worked, you wouldn't feel like you came up with it on your own. So you wouldn't really feel that it meant anything to you like it could. And then if it didn't work, you'd blame me. So I can't tell you, right? I can't tell you what to do. This is for you to explore. And I saw my role as just somebody to shine a light on things and let people find their own insights. The idea of, I don't know if you've ever heard of the term guru, but it means bringer of light. Yeah, bringer of light. And I think everybody's their own guru. And there's actually a term for that called the upaguru, the guru within. So I think we all need to bring our own light.
Best guru. People always say that's one of my big things. Yeah. Why do we always feel like we have to follow somebody when we don't, right? Or even like dream interpretation.
Right.
If we stop and we breathe and do things, you can go into meditation. There's lots of things you can do. You can write it down every night, like when you wake up in the morning. But you will know what that means because it's personal to you and your subconscious, whether you want to call it your higher self, your subconscious, what have you. And you can go to a million different dream interpreters, and they're all going to tell you something different. The only one that's going to know is you. You are your own guru. Right. I agree.
Yeah. And so tapping into that self is really important. And I think we live in a very special time where, we have a lot of teachers out there, a lot of guides out there, if we're open, right? If we're open to listening and then listen to our own wisdom, listening to what we need. Everyone is like an acorn that grows into this great, strong oak tree, right? We all have the seed of that oak within us. And so, I think it's a beautiful thing. We can just find our own wisdom.
I was just thinking what an incredible psychotherapist you must be, and that we could probably use 100 million of you, because to have that kind of background, and even what I do as a nurse, when you said at the beginning, I forget how you said it, but basically life changed, kind of like not what you were expecting. Well, here I was, I had my degree in nursing. I mean, I had two boys I was told I'd never have. Well, I didn't have the second one yet. And then because of an accident that happened in less than 3 seconds of somebody, I was community visiting nurse full time. And walking out and a separate door, which was closer to my car, it was a trailer park. And the gentleman had covered the hole in his front landing outside steps with a rug. And I fell through, shattered all my discs. Now, I was
Oh,
planning on
wow.
going to medical school. I was planning on doing all these things. And we can plan all we like, but
Mm.
life has different plans for us, right? And it's the same thing. Like before we went live, for example, so I was talking to you before the show about comments. So I've highlighted, I'm going to call her, I know who this is. This is Linda. She said, yes, I agree. People need guidance to find their own answers. And sometimes they do. But I think we also bear some self-responsibility. Like you said, Donald, you ran into somebody that really, really, I'm going to say almost not so much impressed you, but it left such an impression, right? And you knew what you were
Yeah.
doing wasn't working, and you followed your intuition, guidance, whatever it was, curiosity, and look at the change it made in your life, right?
I think we have an opportunity that everybody that we meet can be a teacher in some way to us. And some can be
Mhm,
teachers who provide deeper wisdom, even. And so we need to open
mhm,
ourselves up to that. We need to allow ourselves to be influenced by people that we really trust, right? And I think
mhm,
everybody has mentors. I call them benefactors.
mhm,
If you go back
mhm,
into your life, there was maybe there's that kindly neighbor next door who, gave you a piece of candy or said that kind. Maybe there's a teacher who said a kind word, or so we all have, and maybe it was a family member. Benefactors
mhm,
have the deepest wish for your well-being. That doesn't mean you agree with everything they think or say, right? But deep down,
mhm,
they uh, they have that deep wish for you. And I think that, sometimes I think about my ancestors. I think about my grandparents and the great grandparents and people I didn't know, and how that
mhm.
history of ancestors, they would all want the best for me if they were here, if they knew about me. And sometimes that's a supportive idea. We need to find that support. And actually, that idea is part of the loving kindness practice that I have found so helpful in my life. In fact, that's what I discovered in the monastery, was that the teacher I had, and I wondered, how did he become like that? And it turned out, in talking with him, he shared with me, he said, that was the one thing that he loved teaching the most, was the loving kindness practice. And I think it had transformed him from the inside out. We have a potential as human beings to be something far beyond what we might think we could be. And and a simple practice of love, which overcomes fear, by the way, overcomes hatred. I think it was the Buddha who said, hatred does not overcome
Mhm.
hatred. Only love can overcome hatred. Isn't that a beautiful? I think we need that
You're
nowadays,
speaking my
probably more than
language.
ever.
You're
That's
You're
great. That's
speaking my
great.
language because I have a YouTube channel and there's two videos I share all the time. And I go back to a science basis. I mean, I have a degree in Bachelor of Science degree in nursing and rarely bring that up.
Yeah.
But my thing is, I've always looked at life very scientifically. But I've also seen miracles happen. I've seen many things happen that should never have happened. I'm going to say I've had an extraordinary life, but I think it's about how we look at things too, right? And how we perceive them. My whole point is I have the first video, I call it a love shield, because we find
Mm.
some people who call themselves empaths feel very sensitive to energy. And I believe these are tangible experiences that people are having. But I will find that it's all about perception. So I've run into people who will say, it's a curse. I can't go anywhere. I've got to stay in my room. I
Mm.
can't go anywhere. And I don't say that facetiously. I don't say that with any disregard, because there is no right or wrong. But when you know something's not working for you, right, and you don't want to keep living the way
Hmm.
that you are, you start looking outwards to see what other solutions are out there. So my whole point of this long story to get to the video is I use love because I believe love is the most powerful emotion we have as human beings. It can overcome anything. And I teach people how to take that feeling of love and run it through their bodies. And so, we create a shield. I call it a love shield. And it's using your imagination, but our
That's
mind is so
beautiful.
powerful, our thoughts.
Yeah.
And I say it takes longer to talk somebody to go through it, because I want people to do it along with me while they're watching, rather than turning off the video and going, "What was step 7 again? What did she say?" So they know
Yeah.
what to do. But I have to sit there. I know it is. We got Facebook user. It's not letting us know who you are. So just put your name down, or even a nickname, something, so I don't call you Facebook user. Somebody just said hi, Lorilei. Yeah, so I think it's so empowering. And the interesting thing too, I found, Donald, is I'll be 58 in August, is that we don't learn that as a Western model. I'm sorry, but we don't. And when I say Western, I'm not just talking about North America, maybe, but versus say Buddhism or different types of ways of living, because like you said, you were talking about your ancestors and what have you. That's a normal practice in some cultures. But over here, and I'm finding more and more and more and more, it's about materialism and who has the biggest and the best and
Mm.
has the greatest looking Instagram page. And what people don't realize when you have a heart to heart, and I do usually when people come for a reading or a healing session, it's really astounding when you say, those people have the same problems you do. They have the same insecurities. They have the same everything. You don't see them. You see this character on a photo, right? Like you started
Right.
the show out, like you said, like everybody has, go ahead. I know you're going to say something, because everybody has problems, right?
If you don't think that Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos has problems, I
Hi,
mean,
Robin.
they probably worry about losing all. Imagine the fear they must face every day because the fear of losing their either status or their money or whatever it is. I can't imagine the kind of fear
You know what's
actually
worse, I think?
that must
And I've
drive
said
them.
this, oh, sorry. You know what I was going to say, I think is worse, and why I've said I never would want to have that amount of money unless I had people that I really knew had been around me since I was a
Yeah.
small child and I hadn't achieved this wealth, is you never know who is with you because they love you and they want to be with you and what have you. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have people around them that love them, but I think that's an
Right.
added worry. I really, really do. What's your
Oh,
thoughts?
yeah. Yeah. And I wanted
Mm,
to go back to what you said about miracles a moment ago, because I just find, and that's part of
mm,
travelers too, is that a very rational, scientific-minded character, the main character in the book, is confronted by these miracles and things he cannot understand, and he thinks he's going crazy. He thinks he's losing his mind. So I mean, I've always been fascinated in the wonder, the mysterious, and so I would love if you could share maybe one of
me
your
too.
miracles that you had.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, gosh, where do I start?
And
Because
and I
I'm
know
actually
miracles can be
writing
little things, they can be big things. Yeah.
well, I'm writing 3 books. I have my youngest son, and I'm gonna shout it out there. It's, he's I don't know how my baby 25, he severe autism. So with disrespect, he's very much like a 5-year-old. And at that precocious, wonderful age, very innocent, full of love, and sees life through the eyes of a child. It's beautiful. But second one is our paranormal experience we went through. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now had that not happened.
Right.
The third, where we're getting to the miracles, maybe even the unexplained. So what I'm doing is I'm collecting stories from nurses like myself. Most of us are at the bedside. I did a lot of palliative care. If my
Mm.
back, when it gets healed, not if, when one day, I haven't given up hope. I would love to go back and strictly work in palliative care. But I'm collecting stories of nurses and first responders, but mostly nurses, and some of the miracles we see. So I'm going to share one story that somebody shared with me that I hope to have their permission one day to include it in the book. That's why they shared this story. And it was actually
Yeah.
their mother. She's a
Mm.
nurse. The woman shared it. This is her mother who was a nurse. As a little one in the hospital, she worked in pediatrics, for example, and it's a true story. And I guess where I live in Thunder Bay in northwestern
Mm,
Ontario, we have many outlying Indigenous communities. So these parents couldn't stay with this little one. He was about 4 years old, apparently, and got very, very ill and ended up passing away. And the floor was crazy as it can be. I've worked
mm,
NICU before. You just don't know what's coming through the door. And I believe this woman's mom, I'll call her Joan, that's her name. So Joan was able to be with this little one as he passed, and the nurses all cried and tried to
mm,
take the place of the mom. Okay. But then all heck broke loose and they were running. And of course, they covered his poor little body and away they went. Well, there was nobody in this hospital room. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. The call bell kept going off and call bell. They'd run in there, run in there. Somebody be right outside the door running by. Call
mm,
bell's going off. There's nobody in there. What is going on? And they kept going
mm.
on and on and on, like going like, is there something wrong with the call bell system? Like, what is this? And Joan, all of a sudden, it hit her, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I just remembered that this particular family Indigenous belief was that once a loved one passes, you have to open the window to let the soul out." So
Oh,
they went in there and
mm,
they opened the window. The call bell stopped ringing.
mm.
Want to call that a miracle? I don't know. You can call it anything you can,
Yeah,
but a need was met with no scientific explanation. I was just
right.
hearing a story of another person that, because I've studied near death experiences for 40 years, professionally and personally. I believe I've one as a toddler. I hadn't heard one like this, though. This gentleman ended up having a near death experience. Him and his friend were young. They were taking supplements. I guess some supplement came from over in the middle, over in from Asia. They didn't read what was in it. They just popped it in their mouths and headed out for supper, and they got very ill.
Mm,
Now, the friends stayed at the table. They were going out for dinner. It was just the two of them, and they called the ambulance. It was that bad. But this particular gentleman went in the bathroom. He closed the door and locked it. It was a single-use bathroom. And I guess as he started to pass out from getting so ill, he hit his head, and then he popped out of his
mm.
body. Okay. But what happened, long story short, eventually somebody kept trying to use the bathroom. The owner broke down, opened the door. Now, what happened was he had been there so long, he was cold. The body was cold. The body does not
Wow.
go
Yeah.
cold in a few minutes, okay? They had him in a body bag, and this man could see his body from outside the body bag in the ambulance, and there was a new rookie there. And he said, "I don't know what happened, but this rookie was glowing and glowing, and I could hear this voice looking down on what I realized was my body, and it was almost zapping," he said, the this rookie, and a voice would say, "This body is dead. You need to help this body." And this guy's thinking, am I going crazy? Like, what's going on? Anyways, long story
Yeah.
short, it happened another time, and I guess the inkling was too, I won't go on too much longer, but the inkling was too strong, and he started to work on the body. Now, the two experienced paramedics in the front were screaming at him, "What are you doing? This is
Yeah. Yeah.
against the law. He's been pronounced. You cannot do this." Long story short, he kept
Mm.
working and ignoring them as they were driving, and they got one heartbeat. So he kept doing
Wow.
it. The heart started very weakly, and they happened to be right beside a hospital. So if those aren't two examples of miracles,
Yeah.
I don't know what is.
No, that's
Mhm.
beautiful. Yeah.
How about
Yeah.
yourself? Do you have
Well,
personal?
I just think there are so many miracles. All I have to do is go look at
There
a blade
is,
of
there
a
is.
blade of grass growing, and I am, I can be touched just by looking at nature, just by taking a breath, just by finding
Me too.
stillness in a moment. I think it's all miraculous to think about where, the mystery of where did we come from, and we're here, and we are able to have
How a baby's
consciousness.
conceived. How is a baby
Yeah,
conceived? From 2 little cells, and we grow a human.
yeah.
Mhm, mhm,
No, it's really miraculous. I mean, how could you have a universe that, as far as we know, started from the size of a pinhead and
mhm,
developed? this with intelligence, and there must have been intelligence in that pinhead, right? This had to be a consciousness there. And we just
Mhm.
have the illusion that we need to have science explain everything when actually, I love there was a
Science
teacher in the
can.
19th century. Yeah, there was a teacher in the 19th century, Vivekananda, a Hindu sage, and he said the
Mhm.
the infinite universe of the library is in your own mind. And I think that is so true. By
Yes.
going within, there's another universe there we can tap. All our creativity taps into it. That paramedic or that EMT person tapped into it when he heard that voice telling him, what guiding him. And so we need to listen to our internal guides
We've
as
all
well.
been in imagine and having people yelling at you, telling you you're gonna be arrested, and yet you
Yeah.
know what you heard, you know what you felt, and you keep doing it as a rookie. Like, that's the miraculous part, I think.
Yeah. One time I was
So,
I used to live in,
okay.
I used to live in Los Angeles, and
Oh, sorry, hang on. Mhm.
yeah, I was in Los Angeles, and I got mugged one time at knife point, and the whole thing was kind of incredible because
Oh my goodness.
before the mugging, I was walking down this dark street, and I had the thought came to me, well, what if I got mugged at knife point right now? Wouldn't that be a weird thing, right? And then
Mhm.
and then I thought,
In
then
there.
I looked down the street and I thought, well, what if suddenly cars and lights on a car went on, and that car drove up here and they jumped out with their knife, and all of a sudden, right after I thought that, a lights went on in a car at the end of the block, and it drove up, and this guy jumps out with this huge knife, and I don't know. It's funny. We have an old part of the brain, which is that fight and flight. And I actually, even though I was, I wouldn't have won that fight. A part of me was telling me to fight. Part of me was telling to run. I had never really experienced that conundrum, right, of that fight flight. But then all of a sudden, a voice said to me, "Throw your wallet." And it wasn't my voice. Think of. I couldn't have thought of that in that moment. But it was just I threw my wallet in one direction. I ran in the other direction toward my car. And the next day, I went to report this to the police. And the policeman said, he said, he said, I've taken a lot of these reports, and you're one of the first people I've ever met who wasn't really angry. And I said, well, maybe because I could feel this person who was attacking me. I felt their fear.
Mhm.
They must have been so desperate, right, to have to
Yes.
overcome their fear to do this. They didn't want to harm me, actually, but that desperation drove them. And so, in feeling what this other person felt, I couldn't have anger toward them. Sometimes in workshops or do workshops, I'll have people sit opposite a partner, someone they don't know, and I'll have them sit for 3 minutes in silence. Imagine that might bring up a
That's
lot
long.
of yeah, I'll bring up a
It
lot of
is until
fear.
you've done it, it's long.
Yeah, it seems like a long time, and it might seem like an eternity, really, to some people. Now, I would preface them doing that with a story that would prime them for compassion, and it was the Three Questions by Tolstoy, which is a great story if you haven't read it. And there's even a children's version of that story, illustrated book version of that. So then they would sit
Okay.
for 3 minutes, and some people had tears coming out of their eyes.
Oh.
Others would just feel like they would say, I felt like I was looking in a mirror and I saw myself. And that's what I felt with that guy that had a knife up to me. I felt like for a moment I saw myself in him, or vice versa. And I experienced what he was feeling. And that's what deep compassion and empathy helps us to do, right?
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
like the right hand washing the left, right? You you can't distinguish the difference between them. They're working together. And so I think if we can go to
But
that
is
deep.
it okay,
Go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, what was
No, go
that,
ahead.
Lorilei?
Well, what I
Yes.
was, and guys, you guys know if you've been on this show, I have a bit of a delay and it's been playing up. It was really bad that it got better, so I apologize. No, and I
Yeah.
think it depends on your belief system because I've been spending a lot of time, not by, I go with when something happens, it's meant to happen as well as there's a reason for it. I may not know what that reason
Mm.
is, but I'm always looked after. It shows up right at the right time. And it's not because I consider myself so lucky. I think I take the time to notice it. And I have. And I think it depends on what people's belief systems are, because I get a lot of messages from what I call spirit, which means
Mm.
collectively our guides. And you may very well know, but for people listening, our guides, our
Yeah.
angels, ascended master, we're never alone. And I heard two things so profound this weekend that I'd never really thought of. And I don't know why, because I've worked with many mentors. I
Yeah.
consider myself a lifelong learner. I'm constantly trying to educate, learn, and grow. But my dad said something when I was little. First of all, walk a mile in someone's shoes, because we never know what
Mm.
someone's been through, right? We just get
Yeah.
the end result. But the two things were, and it was a channeled message from somebody in trance. And what they had said was basic, because we really are a part of each other. Like when you said, when people looking inside felt like they were looking at each other, we really are. It might just be, if you will, a different costume, right? But when I hurt
Mm.
you, I'm really hurting myself. That was the one thing. I'd never really thought about that. And I do try to be mindful of that. We're
Yeah.
not perfect, though. We're here to learn and grow and have fun. And the other one was, that was so profound for me. I don't know, people may not find it profound, but I
Yeah.
did. But it's a big question I get. And it's what happens to us when we take our own life. I can't use the S word here on YouTube, but when we take our own life. Now, this came from a collective that was that was channeled. And what they said is, every life is a SUICIDE. And at first I went, well, whoa, what?
Mm.
And then what they said is, every soul decides when it's time to leave the body behind. We all make that decision.
Mm.
And we're working in care, I can tell you that. I never looked at it that way. I never
Mm.
judged suicide anyways, but my point was, so
Yeah.
many people beat themselves up over this. Go ahead. I know that you're going to say something. I can feel it. So go ahead.
No, that was, I mean, I had never thought of it in those terms either.
I
But
hadn't either.
I do believe that you're right in terms that somehow the soul knows when whatever it has meant to learn, or
When it's
its reason
time to
for
go.
being here,
Yes.
when
Yeah.
it's time to go. And um,
Mhm,
yeah, I've always felt that.
mhm. Well,
You
the
know,
thing is, right, and I've had many a conversation with working in critical care, for example, and you'll see on TV, well, we're going to pull the plug and then you get this flat line.
mm.
That doesn't always happen. And I remember a close friend of mine, a relative of theirs, had been taken off the ventilator and they were still there. And their own heart going, but comatose, going on weeks. And they had said to me, well, the doctors told us he was going to be gone in 5 minutes. And I said, honey, they make a guess. I said, but that's between your loved one's soul and what his belief
Mm.
system is. If it's God for him, Buddha, the universe, whatever it may be, that's between him and the creator source. And it is, I've seen it time
Yeah.
and time and time again at end of life. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So interesting thoughts. We have a question for you. So
Yeah.
Linda says,
Oh
do
yeah.
you think that was your higher self talking you through this when that happened with the mugging?
You know, probably. I think it was. It was some wisdom part of myself, and I don't necessarily want to give it a name, whether it was an angel or it could have been. I think we all
Don't
have
have
different
to.
terminology.
Mhm,
Yeah, we all have different terminology.
mhm.
In fact, there is a character, and just want to go back to Travelers for a moment. There's a character in Travelers who guides this rational-minded psychiatrist, and the question comes up, could she be an angel? He's thinking of the possibilities because she does these things that make no sense rationally. And I don't define her as one thing or another in the story because I want the reader to kind of, just as I wanted the character to decide that this is just part of the mystery, right? But we all have a different language and we all have different belief systems that we want to connect
Mhm.
that makes sense for us, and that's fine too. Uh,
Mhm.
but uh, but the fact that we can receive guidance, you know, you want to tell another story about guidance? I mean, my mother died at 99. She had a wonderfully long life,
Wow.
and she was some suffering at the end, of course. But and I always depended on her. She was really a spiritual guide for me. I feel in my life, I just feel so blessed. And she was very loving.
She still
And
is.
oh well, thank you, thank you. She is, yeah, I think she's with me. And but I had wanted a
Mhm.
dream after she passed. I was like, oh, I'd like to have a dream with her, and and I never got a dream. But something weird, I shouldn't say weird, something happened. I was waking up one morning. I was in that kind of awakening space, but not fully
Mhm.
awake. And I had a
Yep,
very vivid connection with her. I saw her. It wasn't a dream, and it was a very vivid
I know.
uh,
Mhm.
awareness of her presence, and she was there, and I could feel her. We
Mhm.
didn't say any words, but she was with me, and it was her way of saying, I'm still here. And then
Mhm.
since then, I've connected with her just by allowing myself to settle my mind, settle those
Love
thoughts. You
it.
know, we have something called the default mode network of the brain, and it spins like crazy, right, with thousands of thoughts every day.
Yeah.
But if I want to connect with her, I've asked questions. I just settle into the body, and I feel like an instantaneous response in the body, and I know
Mhm.
what she's saying without words. It's almost like um, you're bypassing the brain, right?
You are.
And all the distortions that can occur there in our thoughts. You know,
Mhm.
I like to think that you know, my thoughts are not necessarily facts. It's what I often work with clients. We have a lot of
Yeah.
thoughts, but how many of those thoughts, maybe 20,000 thoughts a day, tell tell you something about who you are, or tell you something
Mhm.
really profound about who you are, right? So we need to
Mhm.
find other ways of delving into meaning and of connecting with others. So that was a
Well,
beautiful experience for me. Experience my mother, her
super beautiful.
presence, and then just connecting, able to connect with her.
I'm so glad that because, one of the things I teach and talk about quite often is grief too, because you had mentioned something about nobody has ever not experienced loss. That's true. But when people haven't experienced a profound loss, I believe they think they're being like I've not found somebody trying to be mean about this, but they'll say, "Well, it's been enough time. Like it's been a couple
Mm,
of years now. Don't you think you should be moving on?" And again, maybe it's just being able to feel other people's, like you said, like that gentleman that went to such an extreme. He didn't want to hurt you, and he was so afraid, but he was pushed to be that desperate
yeah, yeah.
to ask for. And what people do when we're grieving, which is a normal human process, is that
Well,
you don't ever get over it, especially if
right.
it's a
There are things that,
parent or a child. But what happens with time, a new normal kind of grows around it, right?
yeah. You know, grief and grieving is
Mhm.
one of the themes actually of Travelers because the main character, he and his wife, have lost their child, and it is so devastating. It's
Oh
driven a wedge
gosh,
between their relationship. I mean, it just, and he can't find a way to
absolutely.
heal from it, you know, and and he does find a way to make some peace with it. And I don't want to give away any of the story, uh, but you know, it's kind of interesting. The reason I had that whole theme of grief because I've worked with so many people experiencing grief. I wanted to show there's a way to get over. You know, you can recover from grief, but uh, there's no road that says you've got to do it like this. Everybody's different. You know, in psychotherapy now,
Exactly.
there's a new diagnosis called prolonged grief disorder. And I think it's kind of ludicrous. They say that
Never.
after a year, yeah, if you haven't gotten better after a year, well, there's something wrong with you. And right.
Who came
And
up with that name?
yeah, right. Exactly. And it's caused a lot of controversy actually in the grief field. A lot of grief experts do not agree with it.
Absolutely.
I mean, at least insurance companies will pay, but it's stigmatizing grief and it's saying there's something wrong with you. When in
Wow.
truth, I mean, having a loss like that, I mean, you could grieve a lifetime, right? There's nothing that says
Absolutely.
yeah, and that grief may plant seeds of growth in you in some way. That grief is like a letter of love to the lost person in your life, and so that could last an entire lifetime. And I mean, I think as long as we have to can experience grief and move our lives forward at the same time, not to be totally stuck in it in a harmful way to ourselves, because that's ultimately not what our loved ones would want either. The ones we've lost, right? They would want us to move on in a beneficial way, but also to
Yes,
be
they
thought
do.
of and to be still part of their lives in some way. And
They
so,
never leave us. They never
yeah,
leave
yeah,
us every time. And
yeah.
that's why mediumship is one of my newer gifts. And I always take when something happens with with frequency in a short period of time, that's a sign for me to pay attention to it.
Mm,
And it was shocking the first time I had communication from the other side. It was from a patient who I looked after when I was a nurse in critical care in the NICU. And then when I was working out in the community, the boy, they were twins, a girl and a boy. The little boy had cerebral palsy, and so I ended up looking after him in the community. But I had hurt my back, and I ran into his mom. In Canada here, it's called Chapters. So it'd be like Barnes and Noble. And
mm,
as I walked up to her, it was at Christmas time. I'd seen her in years. I went to hug her, and I heard, "Tell my mommy I love her."
oh,
And I went,
yeah.
"Oh, wow." Usually I cry when I tell this story because it's just so heart-rending. And then his mom hugged me, and she let me know he had just passed a couple months before. And I said, "You're going to
Mm,
think this is crazy." But she knew me. I said, "I literally just
yeah,
heard in my ear, tell my mommy I love her." And then
yeah.
something else happened like that again that weekend. And I think it happened at least twice, if not three times. And I went, wow, this, I need to pay attention to it. And I love doing mediumship. It's been shocking because I'm very what you would call clairaudient. So I hear spirit, and I say within
Mm,
the inner mind, if you will, the mind's eye, not hearing voices
yeah,
or anything like that.
right.
But with spirits, and I think it's because we're so individual, it's like going to a different country. I speak three languages,
Mm,
and that's kind of like you never know what you're going to get with mediumship. They could show themselves, you might smell something, you might feel something, and they might give them, it's really intriguing. But what I love to do, what I do with mediumship is there's nothing more healing to be able to have a conversation with a family member and tell them something from their loved one that they know it's their loved one beyond a shadow of a doubt. And there's something maybe nobody else could have known, and to know they're okay and that they are with you every time you think of them, every time you
oh,
cry,
yeah.
every time you have Christmas, anything, all the time. There's no separation.
When did you first have that experience of clairaudient audience or clairvoyance or connection with spirits?
It Okay, it runs on my dad's side. My grandmother, my dad was one of 17 children. My grandmother was from Belgium. My grandfather, a good French Canadian Catholic man. Apparently, God rest my grandmother, was pregnant every year for 25 years and ended up with 17 children. And my dad was towards the middle end of the children. And as he told me this story, he was about 11 or 12, and his third oldest brother wasn't home for dinner. And my grandmother stood up and was losing it, screaming, his name, saying he's dead. He's dead.
Mm.
And my dad told the story that my grandfather stood up and said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. He's just late for dinner. He'll be home." This is long before, obviously, I was born. And I guess an hour and a half later, the police showed up at the door. And I guess my uncle had been driving in a car. There was 12 boys.
Mm.
The boys used to fix up cars and what have you. There were no seatbelts in the 50s. And we're driving at a massive, massive, massive speed. And for some reason, my uncle's door apparently opened and his best friend was in the car behind him and ran him over. At the exact
Oh,
time,
no.
my grandmother stood up and said her son was dead. So for
Oh,
myself,
my.
it's been ever since I can remember back to preschool, toddler. I didn't know what that voice was, but I knew how many boys I was going to have, children. I knew what their names were going to
Mm.
be. And looking
Yeah.
back, there's been many, many, many things that I've had it my whole life, and I know I have. I don't know. I got to ask you, why did you ask?
Well, yeah, well, that's
Out of
that's a
curiosity.
good question because I was wondering. I think it does run in families, but I think the reason I ask because I think we're really all wired for it to some degree or another. And
Absolutely. Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. Mhm,
and for me, it
mhm.
happened when I was having a depressive, major depressive episode in my early 20s with from the trauma that I'd experienced, and I was on. I mean, I just felt I was almost non-functional, Lorilei. I was, at that young age, I was just had this oppressive weight on my body. I had just really kind of shut down. I had lost all hope,
I'm
and
sorry.
and even though I was on some medication, or it was at that time that I had an experience of this rumbling. I remember the first time it happened, there was like a rumbling and energy inside my head and like a
Mhm,
freight train. And I was like, whoa, what is this? And something
mhm,
said to me, it's okay, it's natural, open to it.
mhm,
And it opened up. It wasn't what I see now as my etheric energy is, and what it happened with this energy was an out of body experience.
mhm,
And it gave me in that moment, and although it didn't last for real long, it's hard to judge how long it was. And I've had several since that time, but that was the initial time. It was like a release valve. It was as if I was being shown, this depression you're experiencing, this struggle, this condition that you're mired in right now is only a part of you. There's more, there's vastly more than you ever imagined. And it gave me a sense of relief. It gave me a sense of
mhm,
hope that I could get through this and that there was something more to learn in my life. Right.
mhm.
So it was and I was grateful. I had a wonderful psychotherapist at the time, and I think that maybe when it was time for me to undergo this journey, I realized that I could maybe help people like he had helped me, right?
Mhm.
Um, but being able to go beyond this ordinary reality was, like I say, it was a sense of relief for me. It didn't frighten me at all. I know that some people are frightened by it, and I've talked
Mhm.
to people who said they've actually tried to block it and they thought there was something wrong
Oh,
with them.
yeah.
In fact, some years
Mhm.
later, I asked somebody who I knew who was a neuropsychiatrist. I said, "So if somebody came to you and they had this problem," of course, I didn't tell them it was me, and they said,
I'm
"Well,
asking for a friend.
well, they pathologized it immediately,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Oh, it's this epileptic. They're having seizures. Or they're having this. They're having that. They need to be on this medication, that medication." But you need to look at the context of how something happens to us. Of for me, it was something that gave me a sense of relief, actually, a sense of hope, and it didn't impede on my
mhm.
normal reality. If you're constantly having, and I've worked with clients who had delusions that were harmful to them, that they never left them. That's something different, and they needed
You're
care.
going right where I wanted to go,
Yeah,
because I was gonna say to you, first of all, is I am now, not that I can diagnose, I do medical intuitiveness as well, and I tell people, even as a
yeah.
nurse, anything I can't diagnose. But I have seen people that have been given the label of schizophrenia, and I am now thinking that there's been some people that have been misdiagnosed, including I have run into some people that I believe to be highly gifted that are hearing the other side. And one in particular, I would never give, confidentiality is so important in the fields that we work in.
Yeah.
And this individual had been hospitalized and the label slapped psychoses
Mm.
on them. And I'm telling you right now, what I know of psychoses, there's no way this person was psychotic in any way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
including very orientated to person, place, and time, very lucid, and matter of fact about they were seeing spirit is what they're seeing. Spirit, like they're clairvoyant. And I knew this because I've been close to this person for a long time. So what I said to them, if you called me up and told me that your aloe vera plant is asking you to take it to Starbucks and it wants a
Mm.
frappuccino with no whip, but please put the red sweater on it, not the blue one. And you went along all day long like this, talking like this and what
Right.
have you. And it
Yeah.
was, then I would have some concerns. I might say maybe you might want to talk to someone,
Oh, yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
schizophrenia,
I
same
mean,
thing. Or like
I
you sharing that.
I
Go
have
ahead, sorry.
seen, yeah, hallucinations or delusions that are truly
Mhm.
harmful, right, and are not connecting with
Absolutely.
spirit. There's something else going on there, and they need to be treated in a medical way.
And I agree.
Yeah,
Yep, I agree.
but I
Mhm.
do know a case of somebody who was committed and was given the label of schizophrenia, and his family
Mhm.
just bought into that label, right, hook, line, and sinker,
Mhm.
and he was just kind of shunned by his family, like there was something wrong with
Oh,
him. Even he left there. He leads a very productive life, and what he was having some kind of awakening experience or some other reality that he
seen
was
it before,
able
yeah.
to,
Mhm.
yeah, it didn't overwhelm him. That was part of his experience. And I think we need to understand that we are, like you're saying, I think we all are to some extent. Well, in the dream state, right, in that subtle state of awareness, we can contact a lot of things that we can't contact in this material reality. And
Mhm.
uh, and so it's interesting talking to some of the monks and hearing some of their ideas. Or I have a friend of mine who's
Mhm.
a Tibetan Lama who said that he had a one of his teachers who actually transferred consciousness to him, kind of like a mind meld that Spock
Ooh,
does, right, in Star
yep.
Trek, and
Mhm.
that he had experienced
Yep.
that. So there's just so much that we don't know, and maybe never know. We'll know with quote science, but that doesn't mean it's any less uh, real or
I think
important.
science is a place to start, okay? And then I think what
Yeah.
we've seen over the last few years is science has really been perverted, if you will. It almost makes me feel like that saying of beauty is in the eye of the
Mm.
beholder, rather than giving things that, say, you're doing a research study, you've got your hypothesis, your method, everything's laid out right. And if it's repeatable by various different scientists and then peer reviewed, that's sort of what that model will look like. Well, over the last few years, there's been a little twisting of it. And in a way, I think it's a good thing because it's getting us not even to look outside the box, but like there isn't a box. For example, very
Mm.
quickly, we lived in a house I've talked about many times on this show, the previous home, that was extremely haunted with violent spirits. And the
Wow.
experience started with a dream like it was 16 years ago. It was 16 years ago. It was like 10 minutes ago for me. And had I not been there, I wouldn't have believed in a million years anybody telling me this experience, including my partner being thrown, Dell, 15 feet across the kitchen
Wow.
by nothing. And so he didn't even tell me for 2 days because his logical mind said I had to have had a shock out of the fridge. There had to be something. But
Yeah.
between the pictures and the experiences, You were on Jason Bland's show. I think I saw on Paranormal Soup. He's a friend of our show, and
Yeah.
he was a big help to us when we were going out. We have the same friend, Gavin. We'll give Gavin Lee Davies a big shout out. I
Oh
love
yeah,
Gavin.
Gavin's great.
How we met
Right.
each other. Mhm.
Yeah.
So Jason, I called into his show one Halloween, and he uses something called ITC, intertrans communication. Now,
Hmm.
I wasn't even planning to call
Yeah.
into the show, and I did. And what came through that voice box, and that was not pre-recorded. I've never heard the likes of anything, including calling Jason by its name. And believe me, it was not a friendly voice. Where does that come from?
Wow.
How did that happen? Can science explain it? No. And it happened
Yeah.
again the following Halloween. I mean, what I'm saying is what we caught on camera, what we can see or hear, like I depending on, and this is just one aspect that we're looking at that's gained some popularity in the population, if you will, right? So there's so
Yeah.
much we don't know. Because what I wanted to ask you is about PTSD. We're seeing this a lot now. Is it because it sounds like you cover quite a few of these mental health issues that people are having. Yet I've met so many people that it's not been successful, say, for them to treat PTSD. Have you found anything that's more successful? Is it something maybe you've examined with the new book? Or I'd love to hear more about that.
It's interesting. PTSD, and we're learning a little more about it in the brain, but uh, uh, what happens is that we get exposed to a trigger, and it stays in the body, and somehow we
Right.
need to release it at a deeper level. You can't just really think it away or expose
No.
yourself to thinking about it again. So there are some body related. There's a book called Waking the Tiger that I liked a lot.
Oh, okay.
And I'm trying to think of the name of the author of that book, but that's a and it kind of takes you step by step to working with it, but it helps you release that post traumatic trauma in the brain. I also think that mindfulness is an important tool, really, for working with any of these things because it gets us very much into the present moment. And when you're in the present moment, it's been shown that you might be experiencing some kind of trauma, something that's triggering you. But if you bring yourself back to the here and now, where you're actually feeling, I can see that I'm safe here in my surroundings. I can find things in here that are soothing for me, my favorite color, or whatever it is. I can tune into the body. I could think about what I could do next to do something positive for myself or who I could connect with. And when you do these things, you're training yourself to volitionally not fall into the PTSD cycle, I guess I'd call it. So mindfulness, I think, is really just a useful way of really harmonizing and tuning this mental, physical, spiritual being that we are all connected with intimately, right? And so I think it's a very powerful tool. Even just taking a breath. Could I share something with your audience? Actually, I came up with
I
this
would love to
idea.
because I also want to ask you, which we are
Yeah.
seeing an epidemic of after this too, and maybe this will cover it, including we may have to let some people even know what mindfulness is, but I think we are seeing epidemic proportions of addiction, whether it's
Mm,
alcohol or opioids and what. So I know I don't usually look at the list, but I
yeah.
took a quick peek and I thought, I think people could find that helpful. So please take it away. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, when you think about addiction, you think, well, what am I trying to medicate away? What sense of dis-ease or uneasiness do I have in my life that I am trying to make go away? And I think anytime that we're using medication, trying to cover up our pain, right, which is a natural kind of impulse, right? We don't want to feel pain, but it's not going to really make the pain go away. Maybe temporarily it does, right? And then you get addicted. That's another kind of pain. You've created another kind of problem for yourself to cover up the first problem. So, when I people say to me, well, where should I start working with mindfulness? Um, I think we should start where our suffering is, where our pain is, where we're struggling, right? And start to look at that
Mhm.
more deeply. But, having a guide, having a wise guide or a wise guy maybe can help
I like
us
that.
uh,
Mhm.
to, yeah, to help, to have compassion for ourselves while we do it. I think when you're struggling with any kind of an addiction or any kind of issue like that, first of all, you want to be self-compassionate for yourself. Compassion means to be with suffering, if you break down the word. And so to be accepting, this is my situation, here I am, give yourself a hug. I mean, a physical hug, if that helps, right? Put your hands on your heart, hug your heart, know that you're doing your best. And that's a great place to start. Not to blame yourself, not to shame yourself for things that have already happened, right? We've all
Mhm.
um, we're all flawed. We're all imperfect beings in some way. So, but rather than go to that judging, shaming, blaming place, give yourself a nice heap of self-compassion and self-kindness, right? Think about how
Mhm.
kindness can change the the moment for you. If you're being kind, if you're being loving, if you're being compassionate, it's hard. That's an incompatible feeling with being selfish or being cruel or being, you know, um, self-harming yourself, right? They're incompatible
But there's a
ideas.
lot of pain. I'm going to stop you there just for a sec with families, right? Trying to deal with
Mm,
this. I want to
yeah.
ask you something that goes hand in hand with what you're saying. And even myself being as a healthcare professional educated with, addiction or alcoholism and the old way of thinking. And I have now seen that there's a newer method out there called the craft method, I guess. And it's talking about exactly what you are speaking about by using love. You still have to set boundaries, say as a family member, what have you, but it's a really profound, different way of thinking and looking at this issue. And I was looking at some research studies on it, and they compared all three. They never said one was better than the other. First was the
Mm,
12-step program. I forget what the third was. I'm trying to remember if it was just cold turkey or letting the person hit rock bottom, basically, or whatever it was, right? Oh, no, it was tough love. That's it. Tough love, 12-step
mm,
program, or the
yeah.
craft method. And research studies, I guess, that have been repeated and looked at, it's having up to 64% success rate with the treatment. So
So
have you heard
now,
of it before?
now I have not heard of the craft method. I don't know who, is that an acronym?
Yeah, it's for
CRAFT or just,
community resource. I'll send you info on it, Ronald, because the person that talks about it, they have a
yeah.
YouTube channel, and it's called, I couldn't figure out why at first. It's called Put
Uh,
Down the Shovel. And I'm thinking, that's kind of a weird name. And it's this
mm,
beautiful soul of a lady by the name of Amber Hollingsworth, I think her name
mm,
is. She's from South Georgia, I believe. And
yeah.
she has just what she has done is incredible. What she's put together, never mind the practice. She's been doing this for 12 or 15 years. And she said when she went to college, she never heard of this method either. But she walks families and individuals through it. And they've grown so big, I guess, the community. She's put together an online community where people from all over the world can access it, because I don't think it's a big thing out there in treating
Mm,
addiction, but it's about love and building that trust and self-care for families who've had
yeah.
it, like they're done. And
Yeah.
why she calls it put down the shovel is because even as a healthcare professional, we're taught that nobody's going to want to get help until they hit rock bottom. And what put the shovel down or put down the shovel, what she's saying is you get to decide when you put the shovel down. It doesn't mean you got to dig
Yeah.
right to the bottom and hit rock bottom. You get to decide that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll send you some.
So yeah, send me that.
I
There are
like
a
what
lot
you're
of
saying
different
about
ways.
mindfulness, though. I didn't mean to stop.
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways that we can
Mhm.
heal and seek help and get, tap into resources out there. But I wanted to show one little, very simple thing. I kind of developed this as a very simple. I'm combining breath, which is, if you take a breath right now, take a breath in, exhale. Now, rhetorically, was that yesterday or was that tomorrow? What you experienced with the breath? It was very
Now.
much yeah.
I'd
Oh,
say
you're
now.
so I'm going to combine that breath with a word. This goes back to that loving kindness practice that I mentioned about that monk when I met him and everything. And so the loving kindness practice has us say different words to ourselves. We're going to breathe in a word. You're going to breathe in a word, and you choose the word, something that you feel would help you in this moment. You could breathe in, may I have compassion. May I have love. May I be loved. May I be peaceful. May I be calm. Okay. May I be forgiven. Whatever it is, it's your choice as to, may I be healthy, right? May I be safe. So any of those words, and you breathe it in for yourself, and you could picture it coming in, through the top of the head and spilling down your entire body, all of your cells just spilling in there with this blessing for peace or warmth or love, whatever it is. And when you breathe out, you share it with others. May all beings be loved. May all beings have compassion. May all beings be peaceful. So whatever it was you wished for yourself, you now exhale it out for all other beings. Again, showing how interconnected we are. That if you hurt another person, you're really hurting yourself in some way. It's what you said earlier, which is so true.
Yes.
So this is a one. It's a 30-second
Shall we do
practice.
it? Do you want to do it right now? Because people
let's
that
do it
will
right
watch
now.
the replay,
So everybody
and they can
pick out a
receive it.
word.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody pick out a word something that you feel would help you or sustain you or nourish you in this moment. And let's take a nice breath in, and may I, whatever that is for you, let that come in. Picture it going into all the cells of your body. And now exhale it out. May all beings, and spread it out to others. You can even picture this energy going out, down through the bottom of your feet, down your legs, and out into the earth, which is large enough to hold all of that, and then sharing it with others. So it's a beautiful little practice that you can do at any time during the day that you're feeling distress, you're feeling triggered, you're feeling you could use a little support, and just take that one
grounding.
breath.
That's also grounding because
Yeah,
we're
it's
putting
very
the energy into.
Taking it into the earth is very grounding. Yeah.
You know what I thought you were going to say, and I'm so glad. I'm so sorry with my delay here, but I want to give you a compliment about this, a meaningful one, with the fact because I thought what you were going to say, but I knew better than to just assume. Because we've all heard of the practice, I'm sure, where people will tell you to breathe in whatever you want, like you said, that you feel you may need in that moment, and you can picture a color or whatever. But I've heard the exercise that then as you exhale, you release what no longer serves you. But I got to say, I love this practice much better. I do. I really, really do.
Well, I think
it's service to others rather than service to self.
Yeah, it connects us to others, and what we want for ourselves, we also want for others, right? It brings us full circle in our connection with others. And I think that if we could do that throughout the day, when somebody cuts you off in traffic or whatever one tough thing is happening for you, or you're getting rejected in some way, or your boss isn't listening to you, or your kids are throwing a tantrum, whatever it is, taking that one breath of what could help you in that moment. May I have greater understanding, right, for my children right now.
Yeah.
And breathe out, may they have a greater understanding of me as their mom or their dad or whatever role I'm in. But just, and what happens is when you do that for a moment, you pause and you're reflecting inwardly. Instead of our attention always going outward, right? We're pausing and we're bringing our awareness inside. And I think that can help us tap with the kind of wisdom or the kind of, you talk about spirits or whatever it is you want to connect with. We have to be present to connect. And if you're lost in the past or you're lost in the future, it's going to be hard to connect with that.
So I have a question for you, though. Now that I'm thinking about it, when it was something you just said there, And again, I think our generation, meaning yours and mine, we've seen a lot
Yeah.
of change, probably more, I think, so than any other generation. But what I am seeing, maybe I'm just getting old at my old age. I always say age is just a number, right? But I can act like I'm 10 years old or 20 years old, but it's just a number. But you go out, say, if you have the luxury or opportunity to go out for a nice dinner, or it could be a McDonald's, it could be a pizza place, doesn't matter, right? You're getting
Yeah.
to go out and share a meal. And then you look over and there's a table of 4 or 8 young people, should be having the time of their life, and nobody's speaking. Everybody's heads bent, and the whole meal's like that. And I don't say that with judgment, but what concerns me is I think we are really losing the art of connection and
Mm.
conversation. Do you have any
Well,
suggestions or? Mhm.
yeah. Well, first of all, what you're saying here, to bring it into brain science, we know that this part of it's called the prefrontal cortex, most human part of the
Yes.
brain. It's behind the eyebrow ridge and the kind of underside part of the brain. And it's the part of the brain that where we find empathy, we connect with others, we recognize social cues and
Mhm.
emotional motions and gestures and things like that. So they tested kids and they found out that kids are using screens about 7.5 hours a day. And so they tested them for their ability to notice emotions and facial expressions,
Mhm.
and they tested
Mhm.
very low. So they took this group of
Yeah.
kids out to an outdoor camp. They took their screens away, and they had to interact face to face with their peers for a week at this outdoor camp. And then they retested them, and their ability to notice those things shot way up back into the normal range. So the good news is we are wired to uh, recognize these kinds of things, and the wiring is there, even if it's muted by overuse of technology. So I think what we need to do is to help our kids find that healthy um, balance, right? Because we're not going to go backwards. We're not going to remove technology. I mean, we could not be having this wonderful
Mhm.
conversation and be connected with other people
That's
without
true.
technology.
Yeah.
So it
Mhm.
is a beautiful thing. And yet, personally, we need to maybe do an assessment or self-assessment on how is this affecting the relationships in my life? How much time am I spending with that significant person in my life face to face without interruption, without looking at a phone,
Mhm.
but really just being there with them, right? I know
Yeah.
I've had people do this kind of self-reflection, I think. And in my book, Clearing Emotional Clutter, I actually have a little inventory that you can fill out to look at how you're using technology and how much time you're spending with people. But I had somebody do that, and they said, "Wow, can I count the time that I am watching television and I put the TV on mute during the commercial? Then I'm face to face with my partner. That's the only time that they."
Yes.
And I was like, "Well, that's again, it's not for me to tell you. If you think that that's enough time for you to develop to keep that relationship alive between the commercial." But I've seen people who did this assessment and said, I've got to change some things in my life. I see that I've gone over a place where I'm really comfortable and that I'm not connecting in that more profound way. Or, you can go to the other extreme. I've had people who became internet addicted to pornography and disconnected
Oh, yeah.
from,
Mhm.
yeah, and
Mhm.
disconnected from their spouse or their partner. And it was a great betrayal, actually. It was hard to regain the trust after that had happened. And so, we need to, what I'm talking about here is just being more conscious of what we're doing. And that's what mindfulness is too. Mindfulness is like, how can I be more aware of what am I doing? And is it harmful or is it beneficial? Is it serve? Is it serving me? Is it serving other people? And just to think of those decisions throughout the day, I think would help a lot of people find some greater balance and find greater connection. So having people around the
But how
dinner
do you
table. Well, like, yeah, like getting people around the dinner table again, that could be hard to do. But like you said, they were around that table and everybody was looking at their phones, right? But just to give some people something to do that they could share one thing about what was one thing about your day today, and to get everybody around the table, and even, you know, well, when I was a kid, TV trays came in, and what I call the sacred circle of the family, where we were all around the table, it kind of opened up, and I had my little TV tray there. I'm looking at TV, but I wasn't looking at my brother and sister. I wasn't looking at my parents. We still had meals where we would do that, but it did change the dynamics. I think you could probably trace it back to then. But what would it be like to regain for like 15, 20 minutes a day, to regain that connection with your family, just to check in? What was one thing of beauty that you saw today? What was one thing that you learned today? What was one
Yeah.
accomplishment you had today? Just to share that, just to make a connection through those
Or
ideas, I think.
difficulty. Or
Yeah, or
difficulty. Because the more we
absolutely.
talk about bullying, it's not
Yeah,
getting any better.
yeah,
My concern, honestly, is,
true.
though, and I agree with every word you've just said there, is that when it starts very young in infancy, I am seeing children like a year old having phones, having whatever. And I'm not judging. Okay, that's not what I'm saying out there, people.
Yeah,
But what my
no, yeah,
concern is, when you've never been exposed to what it feels like to have
mm.
those human moments, but just a screen, we're going to have a whole generation moving forward. That concerns me.
I was in the airport one time.
I don't know what the answer is.
I was headed out to a workshop in the morning, and I was sitting there waiting in the terminal, and there was a lady on her phone, and she had a young child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and this child just wanted her mom's attention, right? Kind of tugging on her and
Yeah,
looking up at her mom, but the mom was just on the phone, just smiling and so engrossed in the phone, she ignored her child.
she wasn't
And I
present.
No, she wasn't present with her, and all I could think about was, wow, what's going to happen to this relationship 20 years from now, right?
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
mother wasn't there for her child when she really needed her. So, uh, yeah, I think we need to think about that. And I love what you said about this being, let's talk about the difficult things too, and cyberbullying and all those
Hmm.
things that really make kids feel like they're not being heard or not being seen or being, mistreated in some way. Yeah, it's very real for them, and we need to address that, and to bring that into the family be a great way to help, mollify or reduce that, I think.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, because I'm really concerned about this, Donald. Like, so with this new book of yours, I know you don't want to give away the whole plot, but what was, if you can share, what, because you've written so many incredible books and Emmy award winning, like with the CDs and the whole bit, but what was the impetus for writing this book? Because this sounds like a really fascinating storyline without giving away too much.
Well, it's really interesting, and I've thought about, because I've written like all these nonfiction books, and they
Mhm.
talk about tools and mindfulness and everything. But when I work with clients, I often would ask them, is there a story? Is there a book? Is there a film? Something that really resonates with you? And what I found is, by connecting and hearing about those stories, is that usually the main character, the protagonist, had used certain strengths to overcome obstacles in the story, right? And that somehow the
Okay.
reader, my patient, connected with those. And I thought, you know, wouldn't it be wonderful if people could, if they were asked about a book, that book could be Travelers, a book that connected them with some strength, that helped them overcome grief, help them to find out more about themselves, help them open up their awareness, right? And not be so stuck, not be so fearful. And I think, and that's why I wanted to write a book that brought people into this imaginal world, but connected emotionally with them in ways that I couldn't do in nonfiction.
Mhm.
And so I really, for me, to write a book like that would connect with people, where they could say, "Wow, that book really brought me uh, to see something in a new way." right, that saw that I could find the sense of wholeness, that my mental issue isn't the whole story about who I am, that I could get beyond, that materialistic viewpoint of things, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with me
Mhm.
for connecting with that. So so this therapist in the story, he takes an unwanted journey, kind of a shamanic or mystical journey, and
Okay.
but through that journey learns about things that are able to help him. He's got a fight between healing himself and healing a young man who comes to the unit who is maybe in danger of being viewed with mental illness for the rest of his life. So
Oh,
he's got to find a way to save that young man and save himself at the same time.
what a profound story. And, you know, you think back to the days of old, like we're talking
Yeah,
centuries back, right? What was the main form of entertainment? We'd all sit around the fire after our evening meal, and
yeah,
there was a respect placed on the elders. But what I'm trying to go where I'm going with this is that many of these principles I feel were passed on and taught best by sharing through story, relatable story or experience. Wouldn't you agree?
yeah. And that's why I always ask clients, what story really connects with you, resonates with you? And so I hear so many different unique things um, that have helped clients. And so what I try to do is to reconnect them then with that story and to talk about it again. And why is that story so important with you? Sometimes it's Harry Potter, sometimes it's The Matrix, but yeah. And that's a great story about somebody who is, you know, uh, overcoming his own fears and doubts about who he is, right? He's been separated from his family, and he has to find his own
But he
strengths.
had to be that way, though, if you think about it, right? Looking
Yeah,
back, because of who he was in the wizard world, had he grown up knowing he was a wizard,
that,
he wouldn't have been the incredible hero, humble,
yeah.
real sense of justice. I really believe that. What, like, have you
I
have
mean,
you read the books? Like, or seen the movies? Like, what's your thoughts on
I've seen
that?
the movies. I've seen the movies, but
Mhm.
I really
That's good
have
enough.
to say, yeah, that without
Mhm.
the struggles that we have, without the traumas, right? In a way, those are gifts to us, and it's hard to view that
Yeah.
sometimes. When you're in pain, you don't want to think, "Oh, that's a gift." Thanks a lot, but the truth is that what you get from that, I call it the paradoxical gratitude or silver lining gratitude. So
I
that's being
like that.
grateful for the things you wish you didn't have in your life, right? And
Mhm.
how could you start to look at that in a new way? And I think at some point, I look at, uh, you know, I sometimes I think, oh, why did I have to have that trauma? But I never would have gone into the healing field, right? I think there are a lot of
Mhm.
wounded healers out there, people who struggled and
I
had
think most
difficulties
of
in their
us
life.
are.
Yeah, I think most of us did.
Mhm.
And yet that in that struggle is the gift, right?
Mhm.
And so
Plus the
that's
empathy, because you know what
yeah,
it feels like. Like, I often have said, honestly, Donald, and I know that right at this time it could be a pipe dream, but I hope I live long enough to see the day where it's actually a prerequisite to go into a
mm,
field like yours or mine as a nurse or whatever
yeah,
in medicine, and not just in the nurse person. So, not having just overnight or gone with like a throat infection or infection. I'm talking about having to have been in the hospital and have that experience without any medical knowledge, and the smells and the sounds and the level of fear and everything else you experience, that you really know you don't know what your patient is going through, but you can be so empathetic and compassionate because you had been there yourself. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think that that's
yeah,
why we get wounded
yeah.
healers.
I think
Mhm,
that's where it is.
mhm.
So, when that person is opposite you, just there's an impulse that you want to do whatever you can to be there for them. And sometimes it just might be just listening to them. I think the relationship is so important, and that's why whatever modality,
Vital.
therapy modality is being used, it's been shown that it's the relationship, right? It's the rapport, it's the empathy, it's the connection you have with that person, and you can't
Feeling
fake the,
heard.
yeah, feeling heard. You just can't fake that, right? I think
Mm-mm.
once you're hurt in some way, that wounding, opens us up in a way. It makes our heart more tender, right? It makes us more
Mm-mm.
vulnerable, and so um, having that tender heart can be a valuable thing in working, trying to help others and ease the pain in the world. The world is calling out in pain. I think it's calling out. It's
Mhm.
and so all that we hear, what we can view as, oh, just divisiveness, different points of view, but I think it's really a call for the pain that people are experiencing. And so to listen to the pain of another instead of judging them, you don't have my viewpoint, you can't be, a good person, but saying, hey, this is coming out, your suffering is overflowing. And I think the suffering is
Mhm.
overflowing in the world right now. And we're able through technology to experience it on a grand level, which could be a challenge for a lot of us now. But it also might open more of us up to this sense of connection that we have with others, and help us to send out that sense of loving kindness to others.
No, I agree with you. And there's been, and again, whether it's coming from my guides or what, but one of the biggest things they've been really, really sharing. Well, I shared a message that because I've been working on lucid dreaming, I'm trying to remember to do
Mm,
or to work with that because
yeah.
I had a guest on and I've never really been able to remember my dreams unless they're really profound. Or as I call it collectively, spirit, it's like my guides or whatever wake me up. So I'll share the experience quickly. So I was so excited. It was
Yeah.
not last Saturday, it was the Saturday before into Sunday. I knew that I was having a lucid dream and I was in this room and there was a whole bunch of beings and there was a lecture going on about
Mm,
consciousness. And it was talking about universal consciousness and consciousness is limitless. And then I heard one of my guides say, you need to wake up and write this down. And I remember saying in the dream, no, I've just realized I'm lucid finally in here. And then when I woke up, but I know why they had me write it down because they were sharing. And I think this is a few things. First of all, they were reminding us that we've forgotten who we really are. And
mm,
without the ego sense, how incredibly powerful we are as creators. And what they were pointing out about the
mm,
limitless was, they said they repeated about 6 times. They kept saying, now write it down, write it down, write it down. But what they were at was they were trying to point out as an individual how incredibly powerful we are, that we can create anything, we can change anything, we can heal it. If we can dream it, we can see it, we can come up with a concept, anything.
yeah.
But when and the volume and energy of that is so powerful. So when you have more than one that focus on the thing, on anything like that, imagine what we can do. And not change the world for ourselves in a selfish way, but some of the things that we all want and we all talk about, like peace and love and, getting along and what have you. It was such a powerful dream. And I think that
Yeah.
that's what it's all about because that's what spirit keeps saying, that I think we're kind of out of balance. And all this stuff is shifting us back to balance. I think that that's what it's all about on the earth. What do you think with
I
this
think
3D
that
exist?
love is what, yeah, I think that love is what it's all about. In fact, um, one of the messages in Travelers that the main character gets is that love is given, it's not taken, right? And that love is meant to
Absolutely.
be shared, and that opens him up. That overcomes his fear because he's got a great fear of death for seeing his daughter die. He's got a great fear of taking chances,
Oh,
taking risks in his life, and so he needs to find that the world is filled with love. And his daughter had that. And that's the interesting thing in the story. His daughter, he just admired her for this great love that she had. And she died at a young age. Yet she knew the secret that he couldn't get to. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes
It
our
is, but I
children,
think we all have that.
yeah,
We all have
yeah,
that
yeah,
as small children. And we lose it because I think of what we either
yeah,
experience in life or how we grow up. And I'm not pointing a finger at parents because I think parents do the best that they can. But
yeah,
when you're sharing, I'm hearing a nagging voice and I don't hear voices, but I have to share with you that when you first came on and you were talking about such a profound and traumatic childhood,
yeah.
that I kept hearing old soul, old soul, old soul.
Oh,
And what I mean by that is I believe we have many lives, that we never really die. We go on forever.
yeah.
We're just having a human experience right now. But what I
Well,
meant by that
yeah,
is I was just going to add, what I meant by that was when I meet a kindred spirit, I believe I'm also an old soul.
yeah.
None of us ever have that Leave It to Beaver Brady Bunch growing up. I have yet to meet one person in this line of work that has.
That,
What about you? It's like, yeah, they can handle it.
yeah, yeah, the Brady Bunch. What a wonderful fantasy.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, no, I know, I appreciate that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
So you were saying about the gentleman in the story, right, in Travelers. So this is something that he's working towards, or is he holding the memory of his daughter about how easily she could do this? And you know what I mean? Just marveling at her. That's almost what I feel like it is because of who she was. Or you're the one that wrote it, though.
yeah, I mean, he sees, he knows that she had that capability, but he's frustrated by his own inability to reach that place. And he admires her, and he goes into her room every night. Her room is left just as it was when she left this world. And he goes in there every night
Mhm.
and he has conversations with her, right? And he
I
feels
know.
connected with her. And yet, there's a part of him that can't come to terms with what happened, right? With that loss. And so his job in the story is to find out how to go beyond his limited view of things. Again, that materialistic view of things, and uh, how to really be with his patients even in a different way. And we actually get to see what it's like to be in a psych ward in this story. And I tried to make it as realistic as possible.
Good.
And so you really will get a chance to see what is it like in there. How does a mental health therapist actually do his work with clients, and what's going through their mind? A million things are going through your mind when you're with somebody. You're trying to just be present with them, and yet you're also thinking about what is the best thing for this person right now,
Yeah.
right? So you're
Mhm.
not. Um, it's a really interesting relationship because uh, it's not a friendship relationship. You have the well-being of that person at heart, and your job is to try to do something for them that to help them see things that maybe they can't see right now. And so but for him, he's struggling. He can't help himself, and that's kind of the irony in the story, is he isn't able to even help himself. So how can you help someone else?
But we
So the
can.
story is, it's a mystical spiritual journey. It's kind of like one of my favorite books, Lorilei, was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So this is kind of
Mhm.
my taking this a step further into the mystical spiritual realm of things, and also looking at grief. It's a very different story, but uh, it kind of in a way pays homage to that, I think. But no, it's I want to take people into the wonder, the mystery of their lives too. I want you to be able to start seeing things in a different way, be looking at things in a different way. One time I remember there was a woman in one of my classes that I taught. I had everybody go outside, and I said, I want you to connect with nature. And I noticed that everybody was, looking around, but this one woman was on all fours, moving very slowly, like on the grass. And I was like, I wonder what she's doing. And she actually, when we came back in after 20 minutes, I rang a little bell, chimed the bell. They came back in. I said, okay, everybody, what was happening? She raised her hand right away. And I found out that she was watching a worm for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Now that might
I
seem
thought you were going to say
incredible,
an
but
ant or a worm. I knew it. I
yeah.
just knew it for some reason. Yeah.
And you know what's great?
What
She
did you
lost the sense of the
find?
I. She lost her ego, the sense of the I, the me, the my, the mine, everything that we defend or that stops us from being connected to others in a complete way. And that dropped away. That dissolved away, and she just was mesmerized by nature for that period of time,
Yeah.
and it took her out of herself. And so it was a very powerful experience for her. It's kind of like when we're kids, right? We see a rose for the first time and it's just like, what is this? The beautiful scent and the
Yeah.
color is just powerful. And then what happens, 20 years later, you walk by a rose, oh, it's just a rose, right? You've lost that sense of wonder. And that's what I'm trying to do, just in all my mindfulness works, to help people
Yeah, but
find that.
haven't you noticed we've only got a few minutes left? I'm gonna have to have you
Yeah.
back on again, Donald. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And
Well, same here.
but
Yeah.
well, thank you. And what I found though, haven't you noticed that a lot of sayings that we have in the English language, I can't speak for other languages, that there's a lot of truth to them. Like I feel it in my gut, right? About everybody having intuition.
Mm.
That's your intuition. Or I just had it about the worm. I forget what it was. No, the rose. Sorry. There was a saying. I had it on the tip of my tongue about something about a rose. It's not a rose, the other name. It was something else about a rose and its beauty. And as I went to talk, I lost it. It'll come back as I'm talking. But my point is, we have all these euphemisms, if you will, or sayings. And when you really break them down and you look at them and you look from where they come from and the actual literalness of breaking it down, that there's so much truth in them, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah. Think about
mm-hmm,
deja vu, right? I mean, just having
mm-hmm,
been there before. And,
mm-hmm.
you know, but the French have another term called jamais vu, which means never having been there before. And
Jamais,
so,
jamais vu. Yeah.
jamais
Mhm.
vu. And my
I
French
speak French.
pronunciation isn't very good.
No, I wasn't sure, and I thought, "Oh, okay, I got you." Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
don't
it's
think I've
kind of
heard
like
that one.
childhood. Yeah. It's kind of that childhood awareness of, never having been there before, experiencing everything as if it was for the first time. What if
First
we could experience
time.
our partners for the first time, right? What would that be
Yeah.
like? Or experiencing anything that we become habituated to, and then we kind of expect things to happen. And we live on autopilot too much. How
We
can we
do.
go off autopilot, right? And I think that's the beauty of storytelling. You were talking about, we used to sit around and listen to the elders. For me,
Mhm.
even growing up, every Sunday we'd go to my grandmother's house, and it'd be my father, my family, my father's brother, his family, the cousins, and they'd always invite somebody to to that gathering on Sunday night, some older relative who would share all these stories. And I was just like,
Yeah,
whoa, this is so amazing. This is so
it
fantastic.
is. Yeah. We're
you know,
losing we're losing that. Now we've only got 3 minutes. I hope you'll come back again, Donald. Like
that would be great.
I
I would
wasn't
love it. Thanks.
we usually have more people live, but what happened was, like I think I mentioned before we went live, Facebook decided to be naughty and not let me post it because I usually invite people via my event and it wouldn't let me create it. So we'll have you back. People will see this on the
Great.
replay, and there are people listening around the
Yeah.
world. But where can people find you? Where can they find? I just listed your
Well,
book site because I know you don't use social media a lot, but how can they get a hold of you if they, want
yeah,
to
you
buy
can
your
go to my
books or continue this conversation?
you can go to my website, which is mindfulpractices.com, MINDFUL practices.com. My email is there too. If you have some ideas from today's show or any other question about a mindfulness meditation practice or about travelers, please write me. That info at Mindful Practices comes right to me. And so I really like to connect with people. And so I'd appreciate that. And then you can find my books on that site. You go to any online bookseller, or you can order from any of your any bookshop. They should be able to get it. Yeah.
Well, awesome. I'm so glad. I was really looking forward to our conversation tonight. But this is how I do my show. I don't usually come in with an agenda. What I actually say to my guides and loved ones on the other side is, oh, Janie's here. I just saw her. She just sent a bunch of hearts. So she was listening.
Oh, that's
Is
sweet. Thank you.
Lots of
Thank
people
you.
are listening, but unless they can go
Yeah.
on the specific Facebook page or YouTube page, we
Yeah.
won't see it. But our shows are covered or carried anywhere where
Yeah.
talk radio or podcasts are carried.
Oh, that's
And
great. That's great.
we go into every country in the world. So I'm reminding people, if you like this show, please share, subscribe, but also share the network, because like we've got so many amazing hosts on the network. For example, Wednesday, I'm going to be on one of our newer host shows. He was on when he first came to the network, Bart Sharp, and please forgive me, I did not write the name of the show down, but I believe it's mid-afternoon. Thursday night, you get a lot of me this week. Thursday night, I will be back with the thing at the foot of the bed with David. I don't know what we're going to talk about. We'll find something unusual and strange and exciting to talk about. We always have the best conversations. And don't forget, we always have the unpredictable, predictable readings. So sometime during that 2-hour period, you guys can ask questions, like we always involve you. And if it lights up for us, we will pick you and share with you what we pick up from Spirit for you. So I want to thank you again for being here, Donald. I will have Donald back.
Well,
I will be back
thanks,
next
Lorilei.
Monday. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was
I was
just going to say
thank you. And you brought up so many great ideas that my mom's still kind of spinning with some of the things that you said that I think were really great and shedded some extra light into how I think about things. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And if that's help for anybody else, I actually just did post on Facebook today. I don't look for stuff. I'm a resin artist. So I have to be moving all the time. So I have my hands up to my elbows in sticky resin with molds and hand painting. I love to create. That's when I do my meditation and stuff very quickly. But I have something I'm listening to as well on autoplay. And it happened to play these 4 trance-channeled messages on this particular channel that started playing. They were so profound and incredible, believable, that I actually shared them on social media. And I think they gave a lot of answers about what's been going on in the last 3 years, some of the things we talked about tonight. And I hope you guys will find that powerful. I have 2 groups on Facebook, or maybe useful. Paranormal University for all things paranormal, and then the Angel Rocker Tribe for many of the things Donald and I talked about tonight. You ever want to get a hold of me to book a reading, show idea, guest idea? I do healing, energy work. I also do mentoring. Feel free to get a hold of me on the Angel Rock. Sorry, my brain is shutting down on me all of a sudden. Facebook.com/Angel Rock. Stay tuned. We have the amazing Philip and Julia Syracusa. Love them, with the Horsefly Chronicles coming up next. So wherever you may be, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I send you all so much love and light and much gratitude to you, Donald. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks.
He's coming back. We're not even close to scratching the surface. I know this. So
good.
If he says yes, I'm having it. All right, you guys, we'll see you next. We'll see you on Wednesday and then Thursday, because I'm going to be a guest. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Okay. Bye now. Thanks.